Doing better. Emily blinked. Better? He seemed surprised. You didn't know? Know what? David immediately looked uncomfortable. I thought she told you. Told me what? He hesitated, then quietly said, Never mind. Emily's heart began racing. David, it's not my place. You just said she's doing better. He sighed. She had a rough few months. What happened? He looked around the grocery aisle to make sure no one was listening. She went through counseling. Emily stared at him. Counseling? He nodded. She's okay now. For what? I really shouldn't say. David, he shook his head. If Sarah wanted you to know, he stopped himself. She would have told you. Emily drove home feeling even more unsettled. Counseling? For what? Depression, anxiety, a breakup. None of it explained why Sarah had disappeared immediately after the wedding. That evening, Ryan noticed she seemed distracted. You've been quiet. Emily decided to tell him. I ran into David. Ryan looked up. Sarah's brother? Yeah. How's he doing? He mentioned Sarah went through counseling. Ryan froze, just for a second. A second so brief most people would have missed it. Emily didn't. You knew? Ryan slowly put down his fork. He stopped. Emily felt her stomach tighten. You knew? Ryan rubbed his forehead. I wasn't supposed to. What does that mean? He looked genuinely uncomfortable. Sarah asked me not to tell anyone. Emily stared at him. My best friend spent months in counseling. And somehow my husband knew before I did? Ryan didn't answer. The silence between them suddenly felt enormous. Finally he spoke. It wasn't my secret. Emily pushed her chair back. No. Her voice was calm. It should have been mine. She walked upstairs without another word. Ryan didn't follow immediately. For the first time since they had been married, Emily wondered whether the person keeping her in the dark wasn't Sarah at all. It might have been her own husband. Emily barely slept that night. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was hurt. There was a difference. If Sarah had gone through something serious enough to need counseling, why hadn't she told her? They had shared everything for more than 20 years. Heartbreaks, family problems, financial struggles, even the smallest disappointments had always become conversations over coffee. Now Emily had discovered that someone else knew before she did. Ryan. The thought refused to leave her alone. The next morning, Ryan was already making coffee when she walked downstairs. He looked tired. Neither of them had slept much. Morning, he said quietly. Emily answered with a small nod. For several minutes, the only sound in the kitchen came from the coffee maker. Finally, Ryan spoke. I know you're upset. Emily looked at him. I don't understand. I know. Then help me understand. Ryan sighed. It's not my story to tell. Emily folded her arms. Was it something terrible? I can't answer that. Was she sick? I can't answer that either. Did someone hurt her? Ryan closed his eyes for a second. Emily. No. Her voice remained calm. I'm not asking because I'm curious. She paused. I'm asking because she's been my best friend since I was 6 years old. Ryan slowly nodded. I know. And somehow, she struggled to finish the sentence. I'm the last person everyone seems to trust. Ryan walked closer. That's not true. Isn't it? He reached for her hand. Emily gently pulled it away. Not because she wanted to punish him, because she suddenly wasn't sure what she was supposed to believe. The drive to school felt unusually long that morning. Throughout the day, she found herself making small mistakes in class. She called students by the wrong names, forgot where she'd placed attendance sheets. One of her co-workers noticed. "You okay?" Emily smiled automatically. "Just didn't sleep well." It was easier than explaining the truth. That afternoon, as she walked toward the parking lot, her phone rang. The screen displayed a name she hadn't expected to see. Sarah. Emily answered immediately. "Hello." Silence. Then Sarah spoke. "Can we meet?" Emily didn't hesitate. "Of course. There's a small coffee shop on Grant Avenue. I know it. Tomorrow. What time?" 5. Emily smiled for the first time in days. "I'll be there." Sarah hesitated. "Emily." "Yeah?" "I'm sorry." Before Emily could answer, the call ended. The following day seemed endless. She glanced at the classroom clock every few minutes. By 4:30, she was already driving toward the coffee shop. She arrived 15 minutes early, ordered 2 cappuccinos, one for herself, one for Sarah. Just like old times. At exactly 5 o'clock, the front door opened. Sarah stepped inside wearing a grey sweater and jeans. She looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Emily stood. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Sarah quietly said, "You still remembered my order?" Emily smiled sadly. "Some things are hard to forget." Sarah sat down. Neither woman touched her coffee. For almost a full minute, they simply looked at one another. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "I've missed you." Sarah looked down. "I know." "No." Emily shook her head gently. "I don't think you do." Sarah closed her eyes. "I've missed you too." "Then why?" The question came out much softer than Emily expected. Not angry, not accusing, just heartbroken. Sarah wrapped both hands around the warm coffee cup without drinking. "I've practiced this conversation 100 times, and I never found the right words." Emily waited. "I kept thinking," Sarah whispered, "that if I stayed away long enough, you'd eventually stop asking." Emily stared at her. "I would never stop asking." A tear rolled down Sarah's cheek. "I know." Emily reached across the table and took her hand. "Talk to me." Sarah nodded slowly. "I will." She took a deep breath. "But before I tell you anything," she looked directly into Emily's eyes, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't blame Ryan." Emily felt her heart skip. The words landed like a stone between them. "Why would I blame Ryan?" Sarah immediately looked as though she regretted saying it. She looked away. Emily's voice became quieter. "Sarah, what does Ryan have to do with any of this?" Sarah opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally, she whispered, "He was only trying to protect everyone." Emily frowned. "Protect who?" "You." Emily's heartbeat became louder. "From what?" Sarah looked around the nearly empty coffee shop before leaning forward. "You remember 2 weeks before your wedding?" Emily nodded. "Of course." "You sent me to meet Ryan." Emily searched her memory. Then it came back. She had been stuck at school during a parent conference and asked Sarah to give Ryan a folder containing seating charts for the wedding reception. It had seemed completely ordinary. "I remember." Sarah slowly nodded. "That afternoon," she stopped. "Changed everything." Emily stared at her without blinking. "What happened?" Sarah looked as though saying the next sentence required every bit of courage she had left. "I told Ryan something. I should have never told him." Emily didn't breathe. The noise of the coffee shop seemed to disappear. People walked past the window. Someone laughed near the counter. A barista called out another customer's name. None of it reached her. She could hear only Sarah's voice. "What did you tell him?" Emily asked quietly. Sarah lowered her eyes. "I told him I was in love with him." Emily stared at her. For a moment, she honestly thought she had misheard. "You—" Sarah nodded before Emily could finish. "I know." The words came out almost as a whisper. "I know how it sounds." Emily leaned back in her chair. Every emotion she'd imagined over the past year suddenly collided with reality. Anger, confusion, relief, disappointment. None of them fully fit what she was feeling now. "Why?" she finally asked. Sarah laughed bitterly. "I've asked myself that question every day since." She took a slow breath. "I didn't plan it. You had years." "I know. You watched us date." "I know. You stood beside me while I picked my wedding dress." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I know." Emily looked out the window for several seconds before turning back. "When did you realize?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "I think." She smiled sadly. "I always loved him a little." Emily remained silent. "But I thought it would go away." "It didn't." "No." "What happened that day?" Sarah looked down at her untouched coffee. "You asked me to bring him the seating chart." Emily nodded. "I remember. I drove to his office." She paused. "He thanked me. We talked. About the wedding. About you." Sarah smiled faintly. "He wouldn't stop talking about how excited he was to marry you." Emily felt another lump rise in her throat. Sarah continued. "I should have left. But I didn't." She closed her eyes. I started crying. Emily didn't interrupt. "I don't even remember deciding to tell him. It just came out." "What exactly did you say?" Sarah whispered. "I told him I loved him." Silence settled between them. "What did Ryan do?" Sarah looked directly at Emily. "He stood up." Emily waited. "He walked over to me." Her heartbeat quickened. "And?" "He handed me a box of tissues." Despite everything, Emily almost smiled. Sarah let out a quiet laugh through her tears. "The first thing he said was," she swallowed. "Sarah, I love Emily." Emily looked down at the table. "He said he was sorry. He said he never wanted to hurt me. He said he hoped one day I'd find someone who looked at me the way he looked at you." Sarah's voice broke. "And then?" "He asked if I was okay to drive home." Emily noticed that Sarah wasn't trying to make Ryan look like a hero. She was simply telling the story exactly as it had happened. "He never touched me," Sarah continued. "He never hugged me. He never gave me hope. He simply said no." Emily closed her eyes. For nearly a year she had imagined dozens of possibilities. An affair, secret messages, hidden meetings, every terrible scenario. The truth was somehow both smaller and more painful. "So why didn't you tell me?" Sarah immediately answered. "Because I was ashamed." Emily opened her eyes again. "I couldn't stand next to you at the wedding, knowing what I'd done." "But you did." "I had to. You smiled in every picture." "I know. You helped me get ready." "I know." Sarah covered her face with both hands. "I hated myself." Several people glanced toward their table before politely looking away. Emily waited until Sarah lowered her hands again. "What happened after the wedding?" "I tried pretending everything was normal." "For how long?" "About 2 weeks. And then I couldn't do it anymore." Emily slowly nodded. "So you disappeared." "I thought it would hurt less." "For who?" Sarah gave a tired smile. "For everyone." Emily almost laughed. "It didn't." "I know. It hurt every single day." "I know. You were my family. I know. Emily realized something. Throughout the entire conversation, Sarah hadn't tried to defend herself once. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't making excuses. She was simply admitting every mistake she'd made. After a long silence, Emily asked the question that still remained unanswered. What about the counseling? Sarah looked surprised. David told you? He mentioned it. Sarah nodded. I started having panic attacks. Emily frowned. When? The week after the wedding? Because of this? Sarah nodded. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't look at myself. She laughed softly. My therapist told me I couldn't heal if I kept pretending nothing had happened. Emily listened quietly. So she suggested I leave. Leave? Our friendship. At least for a while. Emily felt tears welling in her own eyes now. You actually listened. I thought I was protecting you. Sarah smiled sadly. My therapist later told me something I'll never forget. What? Silence doesn't protect relationships. She looked directly at Emily. It only protects fear. Emily slowly nodded. Those words sounded painfully familiar. Ryan had said almost the same thing only a few nights earlier. Neither woman noticed the man standing outside the coffee shop. Ryan. He had parked across the street 10 minutes earlier. Not because he wanted to spy, because Sarah had called him that morning. She had asked him for one favor. Please let Emily hear the truth from me. Ryan had promised. He never intended to interrupt. He simply wanted to make sure Emily wasn't left alone if the conversation became too overwhelming. Standing outside the window, he could see both women crying. He looked at his watch, then quietly got back into his car. He decided there was one more person who needed to tell the truth. And for the first time in almost a year, it wasn't Sarah. Emily remained at the coffee shop long after Sarah had finished talking. Neither woman seemed eager to leave. The truth had finally been spoken aloud, but instead of bringing immediate relief, it left behind an uncomfortable silence. There were no villains sitting across the table, no dramatic confession of betrayal. Just two women who had lost almost a year of their lives because neither of them knew how to face the truth. Emily slowly stirred the coffee that had gone cold nearly an hour earlier. I keep asking myself the same question, she said quietly. Sarah looked up. What question? Why Ryan never told me? Sarah nodded. I've asked him that too. And he always gave me the same answer. Emily waited. He said it wasn't his secret. Emily looked down at the table. That answer had sounded reasonable the first time she'd heard it. Now, she wasn't so sure. He should have told me, Emily whispered. Sarah didn't argue. I know. He was my husband. I know. I would have been hurt. I know. But maybe not for an entire year. Sarah slowly nodded. No. Outside, rain had started falling. People hurried past the windows carrying umbrellas. The afternoon light faded into early evening. Emily finally stood. I should go. Sarah remained seated. I understand. Emily picked up her coat. For a second, she thought about hugging her friend. Instead, she simply smiled. I need time. Sarah nodded immediately. I wasn't expecting anything else. Emily hesitated before asking one final question. Did you ever see Ryan again after that day? Sarah answered without hesitation. Only twice. Emily looked surprised. The first time, Sarah explained, was when I called him because I thought I should tell you everything. And the second, I had a panic attack. Emily frowned. Sarah looked embarrassed. I couldn't reach my brother.